Gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Men of Bronze podcast. I'm your host and founder of the Men of Bronze movement, Stephen Lopes. If this is your first time joining us for an episode, I want to thank you, and I hope you gained something of value here. If you're a return listener, I want to thank you for your continued support. I'm glad you gained something of value in previous episodes, and I'm happy that you're back for more. My guest today is Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Dr. Benjamin Hardy is a phenomenal man. He's a great author. His writings and his success in writings are numerous. He was the number one writer on medium.com for quite some time, for a long period. And he has one published book that was extremely successful called Willpower Doesn't Work. It is an incredible book. I did read the whole thing there, and it was fantastic. A lot of the tips and a lot of the knowledge and wisdom from that book I have actually implemented in my daily life, and it has certainly changed things. So it's a great book. I highly recommend that you get your hands on that. It is also available on Audible. If you don't have time to squeeze it in with the other books you're reading, you can listen to them on your drive to work or when you're cutting the grass, whatever. So get your hands on that one, guys. It's fantastic. That's Willpower Doesn't Work by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. But this episode, we really focus on his new book coming out, Personality Isn't Permanent. This one really struck me. This was a fantastic book, guys. A ton of fantastic content in this one. I haven't read the whole thing yet because I'm waiting to get my hands on this juicy hardcover that he's sending me, and then I really want to dig into it. But I did read a very large portion of it, and it is a fantastic book. So we tackle a bunch of the topics in Willpower Doesn't Work. We tackle a bunch of the things in Personality Isn't Permanent, and we talk about some really deep things, guys. So you're really going to enjoy this one. This guy brings a lot to the table. He's a great man, a father of 5. 3 of his kids are adopted. 2 of his kids are biological. And he's just fantastic. He brings a lot to the table, guys, so I hope you enjoy this one. Before we get into the episode, I want to thank you for your support, and I want to ask you to subscribe, whether you're on YouTube or in your podcast. Please subscribe. Hit the little bell if your app does have it, or on YouTube, and rate, review, and share this with your friends, guys. We need to spread this word to other men. There is a great message we're sharing with these awesome guests I'm getting on the show, and these are great conversations for guys to hear. So share it with your friends, because every man needs a good podcast in their life. So share it with your friends, guys, and I hope you enjoy it. This is Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Ben, it's a pleasure to have you on today.
Steve, I'm grateful to be with you, man. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, I keep imagining the incredible shift in your life when you went from 0 kids to 5 in such a short period of time.
It was intense, man. I mean, to caveat that story a little bit, we did have the 3 older ones as foster kids for 3 years, but there was no guarantee we were actually going to get them. We were in court, so it's the big, huge punch, so there was 2 punches. The first one was just getting the 3 kids as foster kids. This was during the first year of my PhD program. My wife was also in the first year of her graduate program as well. And so we were graduate students, never been parents, never really studied it. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously you can prepare for it. You come from a family, but yeah, you get 3 kids, siblings from a crazy environment, and that shakes you up. It shifts you. I mean, I talk about it a lot in Willpower Doesn't Work. I love the quote from William Durant: the ability of the average person could be doubled if the situation demanded it.
Yeah.
And so it was a forcing function. It forced us to really evolve fast, change our perspectives, become patient, become empathetic, figure out how to, when you're in a situation, it's a lot different than just theorizing about a situation. And so that's really what Willpower Doesn't Work was actually all about, was that situations and environments are more powerful than just an individual. And so, yeah, it was crazy. And then obviously it was a miracle. We had a really inspired attorney. And so after 3 years of fighting in court, all of a sudden, our attorney was really amazing, and we were able to adopt our 3 kids. And then a month later, she gets pregnant. So, I mean, 2018 was a wild year. 2018, we had 5 kids, essentially. That was when I launched the book. We moved to Florida. So to some degree, 2019 was a recovery year, honestly.
Sure.
The whole year was just recovering from all of that.
Yeah, recovering, but you're still in the war zone of having 5 kids.
Yeah, recovering from just the radicalness of the change. It was really stabilizing the situation, and, being down in Florida, just stabilizing ourselves. And so now I think we've kind of got a grip on it. Obviously, life changes, COVID's happening and stuff like that. But I think we're pretty adjusted to the new context, but it was wild. I'm very glad we did it. Obviously one of the big things I talk about in Personality Isn't Permanent is that you're not the same person you were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not the same person I was 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's so incredible. We have, my wife's cousin has 3 adopted boys who are all brothers, and they fought really hard to get those to get those boys all together to come. And they also have a newborn now as well, who is also a boy. So they've got 4 boys now, and yeah, I've seen it firsthand, just how wild it is, and and the struggles that you can have having 3 kids from a broken home come into your home is really unique. That's not something that's easy, and it takes a lot of work as a parent to I mean, manipulate's not the right word, but to kind of rehabilitate these kids into a loving home is a real challenge.
It is, man. Yeah, I mean, admittedly, our kids had extreme, and still do to some degree, although things have tempered a lot over 4 or 5 years. But
Yep.
when we first got them, we didn't know what to expect, but there was some extreme behavioral and emotional damage.
Yeah.
Throwing chairs, just extreme anger tantrums, or just total emotional breakdowns from the smallest things, where like they would just break down and not be able to do anything. And we knew, and my wife comes from a family of 5. My wife comes from a very stable, healthy family. I myself don't necessarily, but my in-laws were like, we've never seen anything like this, and they had 5 kids, and my wife's older sister has 7 kids. And so like my in-laws were just like, this is totally beyond anything we dealt with, and it was crazy, but like you figure it out and you adjust to your situation, whatever it is. I mean, no situation is easy. So it was intense, but things can, I can say from where I'm saying now that things can change, things can evolve. And it's amazing to see how far our kids have come. I mean, there's a concept I learned from Dan Sullivan, who's up there in Canada with you. And, he calls it measure the gain, not the gap, measure the gain. And just looking back and seeing how things have grown and changed. And when you take the time to measure the gain in yourself and in others, you can really see that people have made some good progress. And it's crazy to see the progress in our kids and to focus on that progress, because it's easy to focus on the gap. It's easy to focus on where they still have issues, because they do. So do I.
Yep, for sure.
But when you focus on the gain, it really gives you hope.
Oh, that's awesome. I know in Willpower Doesn't Work, you quote Frankl's work a lot, and Man's Search for Meaning. That's one of my favorite books of all time. What an incredible read. And you can really learn a lot about how to deal with situations and how you can turn an extremely negative thing. Not to say that getting 3 foster kids is a negative thing. That's obviously a positive thing.
But it was hard. A really tough, painful situation. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can really grow from that. And it really is all about how you look at it and how you handle each individual day.
Well, I mean, it's such an important book. What's funny you bring it up is I'm literally starting that book again today for the first time. I felt inspired. I just barely listened to a book on, what's his name? Abraham Lincoln. The book was called Lincoln's Melancholy. It's all about his depression and how that depression moved him forward. And literally today I'm starting Man's Search for Meaning again. I haven't read the book for years. And so it's interesting that you bring it up.
Yeah.
But what's really important about that book is meaning. And that human beings, our worldview is shaped by the meaning we give to events and situations. So like you can be, meaning is how memories are formed. So if you're looking at a traumatic experience or some painful event from the past, you're defined by the meaning you gave to that experience. And trauma, as I talk about in personality, is the thing that shapes personality in many ways. Obviously, there's other things that shape it, but there's a story I tell, and this is pretty crazy. I don't know if you saw this one, but I told the story of the woman, like she's a distant relative of mine who was in the art class. I don't know if you saw that one.
I did not see that one.
Okay, so I'll tell it to you real quick. So and this is kind of a really easy way to explain trauma, even though there's other ways that trauma occurs, but this distant relative of mine, she's very bright. Let's just say that she went to Stanford, and then which is an Ivy League school in the US. And then she went to Cornell and got her master's in English. And she wanted to be someone who wrote children's books. She was a brilliant writer, but wanted to she wanted to write and illustrate her own children's books, because family person, she had kids. She's my mother-in-law's mom. Oh, whoops. You might want to edit that part out, actually. She's a distant relative. But anyways, she, in her 30s, she was in a private art class. And anyways, during the art lesson, there was about 6 other people in this private lesson. And there was an episode where her teacher corrected her. Her teacher was kind of scribbling on her easel pad. And basically what happened was this distant relative of mine became incredibly embarrassed. Like, and like anyone could respond differently to this situation, but there was an episode where she just felt like she was being overcorrected and also publicly corrected. She felt like everyone was watching her. We all would have potentially responded differently to the situation, but she was feeling so embarrassed and feeling like he was just totally demeaning her, and it was in front of everyone, that in her mind a narrative formed. We call it a cognitive commitment in psychology, but so it was obviously emotional. She was embarrassed, and the idea that came into her mind was, I'm not good at this. I can't do this. Yeah, and I can't do this. And so what happened is she never went back, and she put it down, and she never ended up drawing. 30, 40 years later, she still wishes she could do it, but because of that narrative, she genuinely believes she can't draw. She can't, and that she can't learn to. And that's really, that's seeing trauma as a meaning, that it was an emotional experience that led to a meaning and led to an identity and ultimately led to a fixed mindset where you don't see yourself with potential in the future. And so meaning, just speaking of Viktor Frankl, that's everything, because you can reframe the meaning of experiences, but you can also proactively shape the meaning of any situation you're in.
Wow, that's an incredible story. It's unfortunate that she hasn't come out of it.
Yeah, and that she hasn't reframed the meaning of that event, right?
Yeah, that's really incredible.
We're defined by the meaning we give to things.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I don't want to move away from your Willpower Doesn't Work
let's keep going on it.
Yet.
Let's keep going on it.
Because I've really been enjoying that book. And one thing I think I'm noticing is, did you record the voice for the audiobook?
I did. Yeah, you're probably hearing me, right?
Because I'm like, I feel like we've talked before, but it's really because you just read the book to me, which is so nice. Thanks for doing that.
You're welcome, man. You're welcome.
I've actually implemented some of the things that you've taught or that you spoke about in Willpower Doesn't Work into my life since, quote unquote, reading it.
Yeah.
And it's been fantastic.
What have been some of the things that you've liked the most?
What I've really taken away from it is setting up your environment for success, and clearing your mental space of things that don't need to be there. Yes. So one thing I did was I went through my entire wardrobe. Nice. And I got rid of everything I haven't worn in 6 months.
Good.
And it was almost half of my wardrobe. Yeah, I had 2 dressers in my bedroom. My wife has the closet.
It's nice to clear the mental space or the physical space to free your mental space, right?
Yeah, and I put that on my Instagram story after I did it, like clear the physical space to clear your mental space. And yeah, the other dressers in the garage now, I'm going to give it away. I've gone from 2 dressers to 1
free
dresser.
It up. It's perfect.
And so we've been trying to work on that as well, and just trying to set the rest of the house up in an environment that is going to breed success or breed the change that we would like to see. And
that's freaking awesome.
It's really powerful.
What I like about this, and I explain it actually better in personality, but it's still, the concept is there. So one of the ways to describe willpower is decision fatigue. The more decisions you have to make, the less quality those become. Decision fatigue comes from having too many things on your mind or weighing something back and forth. And you eliminate decision fatigue by making a single decision so you don't have to think about it anymore. So if you think about the idea of removing the junk food from your house so that you don't have to weigh in your mind, am I going to eat the junk food? Like, you make one decision to eliminate that back, to free your mind. Mm-hmm. Because if you're still thinking about it, weighing it, or just dealing with multiple options, it burns out your willpower. And so what I like about what you've just described is you've made the decision to eliminate several options so you don't have to think about them anymore. They don't even have to enter your mind anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have to rustle through these 3 or 4 sweaters or these 10 t-shirts or these 4 pairs of pants that I'm never going to wear again. But you never have to
make a decision related to those again.
Yes. But every time I open my drawer, when they are there, even though it doesn't seem like much, you're deciding I have to physically move this object.
Yeah.
And decide.
It still enters your mind.
Yeah.
And your attention in your mind is a limited resource. So why would you want to fill it with anything like that, right?
Yeah. And it's even my wife, she never puts my clothes away. We fold our clothes, we put them away ourselves, which makes sense. She put my clothes away last week, and she said, it was so nice to put your clothes away because I could find where everything should go. Now that I've, decluttered it, it was even less mental space for her.
What's interesting about that is like admittedly, and I know my wife's not going to listen to this, so it doesn't really matter. She doesn't even read my stuff, to be honest with you. But well, she reads the book. She doesn't read the articles. But
Okay.
The reason I don't like doing her laundry is this for the same reason. She has so much laundry. I mean,
Yeah.
she's got and she loves it, and she does wear, she's a little bit more, like she'll wear stuff that she hasn't worn in a year. Like she whereas for me, I'm like, if I haven't worn it for a while, I'm never going to wear it again. Like,
It's different for dudes.
Yeah, it is. And so like my section of the closet is literally minuscule. It's a corner, and then she's got the rest. It's like you highlighted to me, and you helped me just get an aha why I don't like doing her laundry because it's like there's too many. It's complex. Yep. Like I don't know how to deal with it. For me, it's like it's easy. You just hang it up, and they all go in the same spot because there's literally like 15 items.
Even folding women's laundry is a lot different because male clothing is so simple. We have sweaters, t-shirts, dress shirts. They're very basic. Where a woman's shirt can be quite complex. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but when you take a shirt that's complex and try and fold it, it's not as simple as a t-shirt.
No.
And it's almost like an overstimulation sometimes doing her laundry. And this was something I had to overcome when we had our children, was folding baby laundry. It sounds so ridiculous, but this was a whole new thing for me.
Yep.
Folding different garments that are small and my big man hands trying to get them into the arm of a sleeper to pull the sleeve out. And I was like, this is just too much for me. So,
but you're learning how to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I just find that so fascinating that this whole concept of mental space and that sort of thing is brand new to me.
Well, complexity kills motivation. I mean, that's one of the keys, is that complexity kills motivation. Simplicity increases motivation. So if you can simplify your life and decisions, then your motivation will move on.
Well, I couldn't recommend your first book enough. And from what I've seen so far in Personality Isn't Permanent, I cannot wait to read the whole thing. So like I told you before, I've done the intro, the full conclusion, and the conclusion for each chapter. And I kind of breezed through each chapter as quickly as I could. But I've got notes on it.
I think chapter 1's going to knock you off your socks. So it's total chapter 2. Yeah. Chapter 1 and 2 are dense. Obviously the rest of the book is really thick too. I mean, I'm actually a lot more proud of Personality than I am of Willpower, but you'll dig it.
Good. Well, I can't wait. I mean, I know Connie said she's going to send me a copy, so I'm really excited to get my hands on the physical copy for it. And that's part of the reason why I didn't want to read the whole thing via PDF.
Makes sense.
I really want to get my hands on that physical copy. So looking forward to it for sure.
Cool, man.
So let's dive into Personality Isn't Permanent. So this is your new book. Comes out in July?
June 16th.
Okay, June 16th. I'm assuming available pretty much everywhere, but the idea is you can pre-order right now from your website.
Yeah, you can actually pre-order kind of from any website right now. Okay. But if you go to my website, benjaminhardy.com, there's a video of me explaining that if you order the book, I give away 3 free online courses that go deeper into the book, journaling, and also I have a blogging course that I've sold for over $1,000 that explains all the strategies I use to have millions of views, get a book deal, etc.
Wow, that's pretty powerful stuff. I mean, that's a lot of value right there.
For sure. I mean, I want you got to kind of do that. When you're in this world, you got to give a lot of value for free. I want people to get the book. I think Personality is, in my opinion, more valuable than all that stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that hopefully is exciting there for people.
Now, your new book, so one thing I've been noticing as we've talked this morning was a lot of your ideas from Willpower Doesn't Exist or Doesn't Work also kind of carry over to Personality Isn't Permanent, but you go a bit deeper as well. Are there a lot of new ideas in the new book as well?
Yeah. I mean, I would say Willpower is actually a small discussion, and Personality Isn't Permanent. I do talk a lot about decisions and decision fatigue, and about how, just as one example, I further explain decision fatigue in Personality Isn't Permanent beyond what I did in Willpower. I'll just give the quick snapshot because it's a really good idea. So there's a quote from Clayton Christensen. He's a Harvard business professor. Although he sadly died this year, but he had a really good quote that's impacted me a lot. And the quote is that 100% commitment is easier than 98% commitment. 100% is easier than 98. And I'll explain why. If you're only 98% committed to something, let's just, in this case, say it's a diet. Let's just say you're it's being sugar free, just as an example.
Mhm.
If you're only 98% committed, then what that means is that in every future situation you're in, you have to make a decision. Is
Mm.
this one of those times when I'm going to actually eat the dessert, as an example? And when you have to make a decision in every future situation, what that means is that in every future situation, you can't actually fully predict what the outcome is going to be. You don't know in the future if this is one of those times when you're going to have walked out having, in this case, eaten dessert.
Mhm.
And so when you enter a situation where you're then presented an option and you don't know exactly what you're going to do, then you have to weigh back and forth. Is this one of those times? This is my favorite cake, or etc. Or I'm hungry. Um, and so that's called decision fatigue. You're dealing with a decision every time you enter a new situation, and usually situations win. Willpower doesn't work as well as you want it to. And that's
Mhm.
really bad for confidence. It's really bad for identity. It's a lot better, rather than dealing with decision fatigue all the time, to make one decision. And I really like the quote from Michael Jordan. He said, "Once I made a decision, I never thought about it again." That's kind
Yeah.
of the key. It's similar to what we were just talking about. But if you commit 100% to something, in this case, it could be a diet or a goal, then in future situations, you already know what the outcome is going to be. The answer is no in this case. So you don't have to weigh back and forth in your mind and allow the situation to determine what you're going to do. You've already decided. So willpower stops being in the equation. The decision beforehand is what determined what you're going to do.
Wow. Yeah, you almost set yourself up for failure if you're not fully committed.
Yeah, 98% commitment doesn't usually last. It usually plummets, and you're a far less consistent than you think you are. You fundamentally do set yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
And in willpower, I actually explain the idea of implementation intentions. I don't know if you remember that section where you
Yep.
pre-plan for failure. So it's like, obviously in certain situations, you could be surprised or thrown off, or maybe question your commitment. And that's where you even have to pre-plan or prepare for those situations so that you can have a pre-planned response, so that
Mm.
you're proactive about handling situations that may even throw you off and question your 100% commitment. So not only do you want to be 100% committed, but you also want to be prepared for obstacles that could throw that commitment off. I mean, it's just a smart way to live, as far as to not get thrown off and to throw yourself into failure. Because obviously we all fail, but confidence is built by making progress towards goals. And when you watch yourself commit, when you make a commitment and when you watch yourself uphold that commitment, you trust yourself more. And
Mm.
that's where confidence grows, which allows you to think bigger and bigger about your future. Every time you essentially don't follow through on a commitment, you trust yourself less, and quitting becomes a way of life. And so you stop having a faith or confidence in a future,
Mm.
because you don't believe you're going to go through with anything anyways. And so watching yourself lie to yourself and fail and quit over and over on small commitments will destroy your confidence and shrink your future.
Yeah, I've certainly experienced that as well. I think everyone's experienced that at some point if they looked back and reflected, whether it's, working out or
Yeah.
whatever, or if they say, I'm going to start a diary or a journal, and then you do it for 2 days, and then you look back, you haven't written in 6 months. But an interesting thing that you said was, I might get the quote wrong here, is that people who rely on willpower haven't made a decision yet, or a
That's
decision to
exactly what I'm
change.
saying here. Is that
Yeah.
decision is the opposite of decision fatigue.
Hmm.
Once you make a decision, you don't have to think about it anymore. And
Yeah.
if you're
So
not thinking about it anymore, it's not going to burn your willpower out, right?
yes, that's so fascinating.
Yeah. If you're still dealing with something, it means you haven't decided yet. It means you're still on the fence. Like if you're still burning out your willpower and then that means you're still internally conflicted about something. You haven't
Mm.
decided one way or another which way you're going to go. And
Yep.
so you're burning out your willpower, and you're usually failing to situations.
Yeah, you're almost pretending like you want change.
Yeah, exactly.
If you really wanted the change, if you really wanted to be sugar free,
Yep.
you would take that bag out of the cupboard and throw it out.
Exactly.
And now the next time
You'd be done.
next time you make muffins, there's not an option to put sugar in the muffins.
Yep.
So,
And I think I actually do a better job in personality explaining, obviously in willpower, I talk about, if you're committed, you're going to make the decision and you're going to throw this stuff out and you're going to build an environment to
mhm.
solidify and support that decision. In personality, I talk a lot about kind of the deeper layers of like identity, as an example.
Mm.
Like when you shift your identity, so you're someone who, like, I just admittedly, I personally don't drink alcohol. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, anyone in your audience who does, no problem. All I'm saying is it requires zero willpower for me to not drink alcohol. Even if there was alcohol in my environment, I wouldn't drink it because it is completely, my identity is as someone who doesn't drink alcohol. And so identity is another crucial aspect of all of this, that like, if you're someone who identifies as someone who works out, then going to the gym won't require very much willpower, if any. If you don't see yourself as someone who works out, then it's going to probably take willpower to go. Obviously, you can make commitments and obviously apply the methods, and Willpower Doesn't Work to develop that identity. And I think that's part of it. But in in Personality Isn't Permanent, I speak directly to how to shape and refine and choose an identity, and then to build your life around that identity.
Right. And you're saving energy not making that decision when you go to a barbecue or whatever to have a beer or whatever it is. You don't have to make that choice of, oh, I'll have one, or, we're leaving in 4 hours, so I can have 2 beers right now.
Yeah. I mean, if it's your identity,
Yeah.
that's something that's in your world, that's totally cool. Like I'm not judging that. Is all I'm saying is because it's not a part of my identity, it requires zero willpower and there's zero decision involved. And
Yeah.
I think for anyone, whatever, when you want to make a change, yes, you need to change your environment. And I go deep into that in personality and obviously in willpower, but you also have to make a fundamental change in your identity so that you no longer identify with the former version of you that did those things. Like, you're no longer that same person. You're now focused on your future self, and you're making decisions based on what your future self would prefer, not based on what your former self did.
Gentlemen, I want to interrupt this conversation just for a brief moment to ask you yet again to subscribe to the podcast, whether you're on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app. Also, share this podcast with your friends, guys, and if you have the opportunity, rate and review it. You can find the blog for this podcast at www.menofbronze.ca, where there is more than just podcast episodes. I do blog about things in my daily life, like, for example, I'm doing 30 days of carnivore diet right now. You can find me talk about that on the blog. And also on Instagram, you can connect with me personally at Stephen Lopes _MOB. Links for all these are on the website and in the description below, guys. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, let's keep going on the personality train, because I'm really interested to pick your brain on this. So I love the story you told in your book about you and your wife meeting and how you guys had taken this color-based personality test. You guys were on opposite sides of the spectrum, and it got to the point where not only did you guys not think it might work out, but her family was saying, like, you can't be with this guy because your personalities don't jive.
Yeah.
So why are personality tests like the Myers-Briggs, all that kind of stuff, why are they unscientific and potentially harmful?
Yeah. So that story is pretty funny, and it's a true factual story that my wife and I almost didn't get married because of how we scored on this color code test. And
it's crazy.
Her family was legitimately worried because she had been married before. She was in a prior marriage. It was a heavily abusive marriage. But on that test, there's 4 colors, and I'll explain why personality tests, specifically like these type-based tests, are non-scientific and why they're harmful. And they're really destructive for identity. But anyways, so Lauren would be framed as a red, according to this test. And reds are like type A, very, they go their own way.
Yeah, dominant.
Yeah. And anyways, she was married to someone who was a red as well. And that red, that marriage just didn't end well. Like, basically he was abusive in all forms and fashions, destroyed my wife's personality in many ways. She became a shell of herself. Anyways, after 3 years, she ended up leaving. She traveled the world for about a year just to kind of reinvent herself, went and served a church mission, actually. And then about 2 years after all of this, I meet her, and I'm the first person she actually dates. Well, so the color code was a popular personality test, and it was something that she liked, her family liked. I ended up taking the test. And the test breaks people up into four categories. Reds are type A, dominant people. Blues are more relationship based. They're like really kind and just focus on relationships. Whites are like passive, thoughtful, dreamer type people, aloof. And then basically your yellows are like your life of the party extroverts. So like that's the 4 categories of people according to that test. You're one of those 4 types of people. But anyways, when they found out that I was a white, her and my wife's parents, they were very concerned because they were like, okay, I see what Lauren's up to. Like, Lauren was previously in a very abusive marriage where she was incredibly dominated And so now it's obvious that she's dating this really passive white because she never wants to be dominated again. So like, she's going to dominate this guy, like, you know, and we can tell that this is just a reaction to the trauma of the past. And so they were very much like, Lauren, like, I get what you're doing, but long-term, this is bad. You know, you need a real man, like, you know, and they're kind of a patriarchal family. So they're like, I mean, either way, they're just like, you know, you still need a real man. Like, yes, it was a bad situation before, but there's good men who are men, you know, and we can't have you get married to this white who you're just going to walk all over. And so like, you know, it was wild because I mean, for me, I didn't view myself that way at all. You know, like I had come from a crazy background. I had overcome insane obstacles. I had gone through extreme change. I had been in many leadership capacities in my life. Beyond that, like I served a church mission myself and served in leadership capacities. And I was going to a really good school, getting straight A's, and was like beelining towards my dreams. And so like, to me, I thought, this is so funny. Cause I didn't really view myself that narrowly, but anyways, going through my PhD, I was very surprised by learning, you know, so my PhD was in organizational psychology, and a fundamental aspect of science in general is developing tests to measure things. You know, like that's how you study things in physics. You build tests, and that's how you study things even in psychology. You build a test and you measure things with that test. You know, it's like, and if in order for it to be a good test, in order for it to be reliable, in good science, it's got to be both valid and reliable. It's got to actually be valid, meaning it's studying what it says it's studying. You know, it's got to be reliable, meaning you can get reliable answers. You know, it's like if you step on a scale, like I'm talking about like a weight scale, and you get different scores, radically different scores every time you step on it, it's probably not a good scale, right? And so like these tests, particularly type-based tests, and there are better ways to measure personality, but the popular tests, the Myers-Briggs, the color codes, the Enneagrams, the discs, these tests that put people into really broad, tight categories, they're first off not valid nor reliable. They're not good science. You're going to get different scores in different situations. In the book, I explain just one example. You know, there was a study where the people were broken up into two groups. One group took the same test, and about a week later, they took the same test, and they had the same test administrator in both of those tests, and their scores were pretty similar. The other group took the same test, same time frame, about a week, but the only difference was that there was two separate test administrators for the test, and their scores were completely non-related just by that one factor.
Interesting.
Yeah, and really, if the research shows that over time your personality is going to change anyways. But from like a non-scientific, I mean, there's science behind this too, but what I'm more interested in is what these tests do to a person's identity. So the reason people really like them is because when you get a score, it gives you a sense of identity. You know, whether you're white, I can now say, oh, I'm a white, like, and whites do these kind of things. I really like thinking, and I like dreaming and stuff like that. Like, and so it gives you an identity, which you can then explain to other people so that people can know who you are and relate to you. Without having a sense of identity and without being able to explain yourself, then it's hard to build relationships. And so like these tests give you kind of a fast food identity. Identity is based on the stories you tell. A huge problem with this is that this identity or this label then becomes the way you see the world. And so Ellen Langer, she's been at Harvard for a long time. She's been studying mindfulness for about 40 years. And she's found that when you have a label, you become very mindless to all the times the label's not true. So like if someone defines themselves as depressed, they're going to think that they're always depressed. That's all they'll see. In psychology, we call it selective attention. It's like when you buy a car, you start to see that same car on the road.
Yep.
You notice things that are relevant to you, and you don't notice everything else. You don't see all the other cars. You only see the ones that are relevant. So when you have a label, you notice the label. You notice when you're depressed, but you don't notice the many times throughout a day when you're not. And so your personality isn't as consistent as you think it is, but your view of it is very focused on the things that you've labeled yourselves as. And so when you get a label, whether I'm a white or an introvert, you're going to tend to think that you're that way more consistently than you really are. In certain situations, you're going to be more relational. In certain situations, you're going to be more extrovert. In certain situations, your personality is a lot more contextual than just one way, very narrow. Whereas as people, we're a lot more fluid than that. But the other big problem when you've created a label for yourself is that you try to do anything and everything you can to confirm the label, to like prove that this is who you really are. And you speak in very definitive terms. I am this way. I'm not good with people, or I'm not creative, or In speaking in definitive terms and trying to confirm your label really stops you from being flexible and growing. So what the research has gone to now, and this will kind of be my last point on this subject, at least unless you want to dive into it more, but so Daniel Gilbert, and I'll point you to a TED talk he gave called The Psychology of Your Future Self. It's about a 6-minute TED talk. You and your audience would freaking love it. But what he does is he talks about how we change over time. And so I'll give you as an example. Do you think you're the exact same person you were 10 years ago?
Oh, not at all.
That's a very common answer.
Yeah.
It's really easy when you look to the past to realize, holy cow, my situation's different. You now have 2 kids. You're doing entrepreneurial activities, your goals, your focus, your priorities, your preferences. They're very different from what they were 10 years ago, right? Maybe even different than what they were 2, 3, or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And so the big question is, well, what about your future self? Is your future self going to be just as different as who you are today? And the answer is actually yes. But what's interesting is that most people don't think so. Most people think that even if they look at their past, just like you did, and said, yeah, I'm a very different person than I was 10 years ago. When they think about their future self, they actually think that who they are today is mostly who they're going to be in the future. It's a phenomenon in psychology called the end of history illusion. But basically what Daniel Gilbert says is that people are works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished. And the reason we don't predict the future very well is because we don't take time to imagine the future. We don't actually frame out a future self. But what the research shows, and I think it just makes so much sense. First off, it's really good to determine your future self as a different person than who you are today. They're totally different. They're going to be in a different situation. They're going to have different preferences, priorities, perspectives, goals, focus. And so when you realize that your future self is going to be different, then you shouldn't hold so tight to your current identity. You shouldn't overly define yourself and say, this is who I am, because you're going to be different in the future. And if you're seeking growth, you can be very different. So why would you overly define yourself today and spend your whole goal to confirm who you are today when you could be and will be different in the future? So it's a lot better for decision making and for learning to, rather than defining yourself by who you are today, it's actually better to frame your future self and use that as the benchmark for who you're striving to be.
Wow, I love that. I was actually talking to my wife just yesterday about this. I think I'm lucky enough that in the past 2 years or so, I found myself looking more into this kind of thing, and it's been extremely beneficial. So my answer to your question about future self would have been, I hope so. I hope I'm a different person.
That's what most people say. When you ask people, like when I've asked people, and I've asked hundreds, do you believe your personality can change? The answer is often, I hope so.
Interesting. Well, so the whole idea of setting yourself up and what your current personality is. I was talking to my wife last night about video games, and this is one thing that you tackle in Willpower is one of your buddies who his life kind of fell apart because of this one friend that he kept going back to, and it's a real shame. It's actually tragic.
It is. It's crazy. And
I'm not saying video games does that.
No. But influences can create big ripples.
Yeah, exactly. And so I built a gaming computer about 3 years ago, just over 3 years. And it's been a lot of fun. I've made relationships online via this and rekindled old relationships with people in my life. It's been a lot of fun. In the last year or so, I've almost found myself every once in a while playing a game because I feel like I have to keep the identity of being, a gamer up or something like that. And when I was reflecting on this recently, and maybe it was willpower that made me do that, so I guess I appreciate that, was like, why am I doing this? Why am I trying to hold on to is it because I don't want to lose a couple relationships? Am I afraid of these friends who play games with me that they'll be offended or that they'll judge me? Why do we want to go out of our way to secure these identities and, basically do something we don't want to do?
Yeah.
Because we feel like we have to because that's who I am.
Yep, it's safe. Like nostalgia is a really powerful thing. I mean, we will spend time with the same people and go through the same conversations and do the same activities, even though we know that they're to the detriment of our future self. because it's just comfortable. It's, you get a little bit of pleasure and satisfaction out of dwelling in nostalgia
Mm.
and kind of being in the past, because that was a version of you. Hal Hirschfeld, who's at UCLA, he spent a lot of time studying how having a future self really impacts decision making.
Mm.
And basically, first off, when you determine your future self as a different person than you are today, that they would make different decisions than you today.
Mm.
That when you make decisions based on what your future self would want, it becomes very easy to make decisions today. Like, I'll give a quick example. Like, so I wake up early and I come here to my office and work. And then when I go home at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I'm pretty tired. Like, I've worked hard, I've mentally
Yep.
exhausted myself, and I exercise too. And so like when I go home, I have to reignite like my energy and my intention so that I can have engagement with my kids and stuff who need my energy as
Yeah.
well.
5 of them.
Yeah. And so like I went home like 2 days ago or 3, and my son Logan was like excited, and he's like, "Dad, let's go swimming." Because we have a pool in our backyard, which is very common here in Florida, honestly. And I was tired, and I was just like, "Logan, I'm just gonna watch you, man. Like, I'll go back and I'll watch you.
Mm.
Let me just kick it," because I just wanted a brain drain. I just wanted to like just chill and like watch some YouTube videos or something, just because I had just worked for like several hours, and I just wanted to kick it. And I'm like, "Logan, you swim, I'll watch." And then I thought about it, and I was thinking like, what would my future self do? Like, yes, my current self would prefer to just sit and watch YouTube videos because I'm tired. How would my future self like to remember this? Or if my future self, what would my future self prefer me to do? To just sit and let my son just beg me to swim with him and I say no?
Yeah.
Or, so it's really nice when you say like, what would your future self prefer? And what would be the result that would lead to a better future self or situation with me and my son? And so making decisions in the present is a lot better when you think about what your future self would want or how they would want to remember it or what would set them up for success versus your current self. And when you do that, then you have to face the honesty of situations like you with the computer, where it's like, yeah, this thing brings a lot of nostalgia. It's nice. You did get a lot of pleasure in it from the past. Your little identity conflicted with it now because you've got different goals in the future, and you can see that this thing would hinder or hamper the future self you're trying to create.
Yep.
Or maybe it's even hindering and hampering potentially your relationships here and now. It might not be, but in some cases it could. And so you just, yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, in the book, Willpower Doesn't Work, I call it a point of no return in many ways, but you have to sometimes break off with your former identity. And and to break off with the environments and the situations that would trigger you wanting to go back. Because, identity is a powerful thing, but your current self actually has a different identity than your former self. How you see the world and how you even view gaming and how you relate with gaming is a little different than how you did 3 or 4 years ago.
Yep.
Your future self is going to relate to that even differently. And so, you just have to decide how you want to relate with that thing and who you're going to be today. And, that may be you playing once a month, or that may be you just saying, my future self, is so big that I really can't waste my time on that. However you choose to decide what you do with that. There is no judgment towards the former self, though, only just a recognition that that's where they were. And you can have empathy and compassion, and also a recognition that you're a different person than that person.
Yeah, there would be no benefit on judging your former self in that sense. There's nothing good that's going to come from that. But
in any sense, I mean, even when you made legit mistakes, or or just when there's no. It's like judging history. There's no, you can learn from it, but there's no reason to impose your current views on it.
Yeah. Have you had any pushback from the scientific community on, kind of, I guess, saying that personality tests are harmful and, unscientific? How do your peers feel about that?
Well, I mean, I have to say most psychologists actually feel the same way.
Interesting.
I learned this. I'm sharing with you the science of how psychology works. I learned this from all of my professors that tests like these are not good. And so, everything I've explained, I've drawn on from science, as far as mindfulness, as far as labels and how they shape your identity and your goals. I will say that there are certain psychologists who love these tests.
Yeah.
And so not every psychologist views the world the same. In fact, every psychologist views the world very biased.
Yeah.
We all, we draw on science and we inform our worldview, but yeah, there's a lot of people who don't love what I'm saying. And there's a lot of, here's something, and maybe you'd share this in the show notes if you want, maybe not, but I wrote an article about this recently on Psychology Today about, reasons why these tests are harmful. you wouldn't believe the amount of comments I got back. And it's this, not only do people, because people love these tests and they've really identified with their type or their category. Not only do they identify with their category, and so if someone's attacking the test, they feel like they're attacking their identity, but they also now essentially worship the test. Like I've had a lot of people defend the test extremely, and because the test now has become a part of their identity. Like the test itself is such a huge aspect of how they see the world and other people, that to explain why this thing might be harmful or invalid or non-useful is like attacking their identity. And when something's a part of your identity, you defend it like crazy, and you have a hard time having a non-emotional conversation about it. There's actually a really good like little essay by Paul Graham. He's an entrepreneur of some sort, and he's a really smart guy, and he talks about the need to keep your identity small, because if you've overly identified with things, then you can't actually think rationally about them. And so for me, obviously I have aspects of my identity. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a writer. I mean, there's things that I do, but I also, because I know that I'm not the same person I was in the past, and because I know my future self is going to be different, and also to some degree I have some ideas of who I want to be in the future, and I get to decide that and strive for that, I know that aspects of my current self are at odds with my desired future self. And that the extent to which I can let go of my current identity, or even not hold it so tightly, the more I can focus on the future version of me that I want to be, the more I can start to make the decisions that I want to make versus holding so tight. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting. The more and more I've learned about personality and even identity, and those are two separate topics, but your personality is generally driven by your identity. Your identity is how you see yourself. It's how you define yourself, and it's how you behave. And that's what ultimately over time becomes your personality. Your personality is really your comfort zone, and it's how you consistently act over time. And so when you change your identity and your surroundings and things like that, your personality will adjust to that over time. And so the premise of my book is honestly, the common cultural views of personalities is that it's innate, it's non-changeable, it's hardwired, and that your job is to find yourself. Personality tests claim to do that. And once you've found yourself, you can then pursue goals and things like that that support your current personality, that would be within your comfort zone. And things, to do anything outside of who you really are would be disastrous. Even if you really wanted to do something different, your job is really just to be true to who you really are.
Yeah.
That's kind of the common view. It's not good in the science. It's also really bad for flexibility, and imagination and confidence development and learning. It's really a fixed mindset at the end of the day. But so my premise of my book is rather than having your goals be the byproduct of your personality, it's far more powerful to have your personality be the byproduct of your goals.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
So you choose goals that shape who you become.
Yep.
I chose to be a writer 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and that shaped me in a lot of ways. I chose to be a father. That shaped me, and so you choose who your future self is, and that future self and the goals you set along the way should reshape who you become. If you want to be more confident or more kind, rather than having your goals be the byproduct of who you currently see yourself as, to confirm your current identity, it's a lot more powerful to upgrade your identity and upgrade who you are. And you can change. You can become better in all ways. And so personality is flexible, but people's identity, and how they define themselves really stops them from growing.
Wow. Yeah.
It keeps them in environments. You know what I mean? It keeps them in situations. It really stunts them. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, that was, I was hoping to segue into other societal myths about personality, and I think you touched on a few of them there.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame how we limit ourselves. Say you want a better relationship with someone, or you want to deal with your anger or something, or you don't want to deal with it. You really limit yourself by saying like, oh, well, that's just the way I am. I'm an angry person. That's why I react in that way. So everyone else should adjust around me. So no, you should be adjusting.
And that's really how Myers and Briggs, they dealt with people. I mean, so Catherine and, like the people who built those tests, their premise of people was that we're all hardwired at birth. And that rather than trying to change yourself, the people around you should adjust to you. So if you're someone with anger issues, like that's just who you are. And rather than trying to change yourself, the people around you just need to adjust to the real you. That
Yeah.
was her view of people. And that's how
Yeah.
she built the test.
That's such a ridiculous way to look at life, isn't it?
It's a
Like,
non-adaptive, non-flexible way. I mean, if you
yeah.
think about even Charles Darwin, I mean, one of the things he said with evolution is that it's not this, and I quoted this in Willpower, but it's not the strongest of species or the smartest. It's those that are the most adaptive to change.
Hmm.
And really what's interesting, so like obviously the world changes a lot. And if you're non-flexible, which is really what we're talking about, like to overly view yourself one way as non-flexible. And by the way, trauma leads you to emotional rigidity. It stops you from having imagination and flexibility. So it's interesting, connecting it with that certain negative experiences from your past, for example, the person I referenced earlier about the art class, certain experiences can lead you to overly defining yourself one way and being very rigid and non-flexible in your belief that you can change. But I mean, psychological flexibility and being adaptive is really how you learn. I mean, when you put yourself in new situations, or when you're dealing with new challenges, or when you're pursuing big goals, you're constantly stepping out of your current frame of reference. You're putting yourself in new situations, and you've got to learn how to develop flexibility and confidence and to handle your emotions outside of your comfort zone. I mean, that's really how you learn. But if you're so rigid, you're going to stay so tight within your frame, and you're going to say, nothing outside of that is anything I can do anyways. This is who I am. And so all of a sudden your potential for growth and change are fundamentally stalled, and your whole job is to confirm your current identity. I mean, it's a really strange, terrible way to live.
Yeah, that's one of the things that you did tackle in Willpower was having the fixed mindset of learning. And if you identify with, not being a very good reader, or, I can't digest written down information, I'm a visual person. The idea was, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can consume other medias and learn from them. You just need to find the right medium, or you need to just try it, right? Is that kind of the idea? Like,
well, so put it this way, when you've said, I'm not good at this, right? What are you basing that on? You're probably basing it on former experiences, right? And so that's probably true. You've maybe had some challenging experiences with reading in the past. Totally understood.
Yep.
The question is, do you want to be defined by former experiences or by future goals? Because if you want to be defined by future goals, then your future self may be someone who's great at reading. And if you're someone who's great at reading in the future, you're going to have to go through what we call deliberate practice, which is essentially the process of learning how to become a good reader. So it's really about your reference point. Yes, if you define yourself as someone who's bad at reading, then you're defining yourself based on former experiences. The goal of this book is to help people define themselves based on their future goals, so that they can then go through the learning process of becoming better. So rather than saying I'm bad at reading, it's saying I want to become good at reading. I'm not good at reading yet, but I'm going to learn how to digest this. And then you can obviously go through the learning process of becoming better.
Yeah, it's almost a bit of a cop out.
Yeah, well, it's just like, being defined by the past.
Yeah, that's like saying I can't bench press 200 pounds
because you haven't done it in the future, right?
Yeah,
or because you're defined by the past.
Yeah, I can't do it right now. It's like, well, I just can't lift that kind of weight. It's like, well, if you practice and you work on it slowly and you build yourself up, you can bench press that much.
Yeah, and really deliberate practice. So deliberate practice was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell as the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
But deliberate practice really means that you're practicing towards a future self. And so like, if you want to bench press 250 pounds as an example, you'd have to see yourself as someone who could do that. And your process would have to be, your daily process would have to be relevant towards getting to that goal, And so the goal is what shapes the process, and the process is how you get there. So that process, maybe you get a personal trainer, you go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week and you work your way up, but that process transforms you to your future self, whatever that is. And so you can get there if you can define that future self and their attributes and their situation, and then go through a specific process to getting there. I mean, there is a process to achieving goals. There's a process to getting where you want to go, becoming a millionaire or becoming a husband or whatever you want to be. You have to define that future self first in order to actually create a process to get there.
That's awesome. I think that's been pretty great. We're actually nearing on 50 minutes here. So one thing I want to ask you before I kind of let you go is there a few things that you would like the listeners to take away from the conversation that they can, we covered so much. What are a few takeaways that you would really like to pound into the minds of the guys listening?
Yeah. First off, thank you for listening. Anyone who's listening, let's just say this. Here's kind of 3 big ideas. One is you're not defined by your former experiences. You're not the same person you were in the past, and your future self is different from who you're going to be today. And it's far more powerful to be defined by your desired future self. So you have to take the time to define and decide that. So that's step 1, is define and decide your future self. Step 2 is start telling everyone about who your future self is. That takes courage. That takes freaking courage. Yeah. Rather than defining yourself based on how you've been in the past. Because usually they say that identity is basically explained by the stories we tell. So rather than overly saying, this is who I am, I'm not good with people, or I'm an introvert, blah, blah, blah. Rather than explaining yourself based on the past, explain yourself based on who your future self is. That this is who I'm striving to become. I want to become an amazing father. This is what I'm working on. Yes, you're not your future self yet. This isn't necessarily like fake it till you make it. This is acknowledgement that you're not there yet, but that this is where you're going. This is what you're focused on. This is what you're striving for. That is, in my opinion, the only way to be genuinely authentic, because you're actually admitting and owning up to who you want to be, rather than just living up to the expectations or the norms of who you've been. Be honest and tell everyone about who you want to be. It'll really clarify your environment, create good accountability, but also clarify the people who won't support your future self. The third step is 100% is easier than 98%. Make powerful decisions and then design around those decisions and eliminate decision fatigue. You will waste confidence and progress by not making full decisions. By making decisions and seeing those through, even small decisions, you start to build confidence. And as your confidence grows, your future self will expand as well, because your future self, or your imagination, or your belief in what you can do is based on your confidence in many ways, also based on your context. But yeah, so those are the 3 things: is define you're not the same person you were. You're going to be a different person in the future. Define your future self, then start telling everyone about your future self, and, ultimately, make the decision and build your environment around that.
That's awesome. I think that's incredible. And the whole idea of setting up your environment, that's one thing that, like I told you before, I've kind of implemented in my life, and that I'm trying to implement more. And it is so powerful.
Yeah. There's a full chapter on environment and personalities and permanent, and about how to design around your future self.
That's awesome. So one thing for sure that I want to tell the listeners is, as someone who's read Willpower Doesn't Work, definitely go get it, and definitely put in your calendar the release date, June 16th, you said?
Yep.
For Personality Isn't Permanent, because these are powerful books, and I think the message rings true for a lot of people. And I think it's the kind of message that needs to get out here. And that's why I was so excited to have you on the show, Ben.
It's a pleasure. Yeah. For anyone, obviously, Willpower Doesn't Work, more than available, been out for over 2 years. Personality does come out on the 16th. You can get it early. And when you pre-order the book, go to my website, benjaminhari.com, and I'll give you a full course. A thing about this book is there's actually about 150 journal prompts through this book that help you reframe former experiences, design future identity. So I have an online course that walks you through those exercises, and there's a full journaling course. Obviously, journaling is a big aspect of both of these books. There's a full journaling course and then a blogging course. So you can pre-order and get the book Personality Isn't Permanent now and get all of these free resources. But definitely, as you said, I'm glad you loved Willpower. Both books are available, and just thanks for letting me be on your show, man.
Yeah, for sure. One more time before I let you go. What is your website?
benjaminhardy.com.
Perfect. And we're gonna plug that in the show notes, on the social media. I know I can't put links in Instagram, but we'll make sure the links are on the Facebook posts. So I'll have you send me over the links, any like the TED Talk you want to put in, or your article that you mentioned that you want to put in as well. For sure. We'll put those in, and we'll make sure they're on the website as well. So again, Ben, thanks a lot for coming on the show. It was better than I expected. It was absolutely fantastic. Cool. And I'm looking forward to reading your new book.
Thanks, man. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Remember to visit our website at www.menofbronze.ca. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and share the show with your friends and family. This was the Men of Bronze podcast. Be worth remembering.